Okay, so Charlie, we're in the middle of the summer. Summer's obviously the time for vacation, traveling, socials, barbecues, weddings, every possible reason to fall off track. What are some of the best strategies you found to stay on track during the summer festivities and traveling moments?
So it depends. You go into different aspects of that. I think I tend to be a bit of a fitness traveling gypsy a lot of the year. Like I travel an awful lot, and with that comes a lot of challenges and also a lot of lessons learned. So I'm going to give you a really good case point scenario in terms of how would be a good way to manage a vacation, for example. I don't know what your thoughts are in regards to fasting, but I think in certain circumstances it can be very useful, and this would be one of them. So a lot of people don't realize that when they fly on a plane, it causes a lot of digestive distress and it causes a lot of problems for people in terms of that's why they have bad stomachs when on holiday, essentially. So one reason to fast, which I'd always recommend people do before flying, I'd recommend you fast the entire flight and don't eat anything beforehand until you get to your destination, is one, to protect your digestion. And secondly, it's also allowing you to bank calories. So for example, if I was going to fly from London to Dubai, I was going to get the 9 a.m. flight from Gatwick to Dubai, I wouldn't eat anything before the flight. I would then board the flight. I wouldn't eat any of the food on the plane, which again is also very beneficial because the food they give you in the plane is a pile of shit. It's not going to help you. And then when you land in Dubai 6 hours later, with a time difference, it's going to be roughly 7, 8 p.m. in the evening. You then haven't eaten any calories all day. So you've already banked up. Say if I needed to eat 2,000 calories for easy math in terms of the amount of calories I need to eat to maintain my body mass. If I then have one really nice meal when I get there in the evening, and for example, I go all in and I have 1,500 calories, guess what? I've still saved 500 calories extra that I can eat on my vacation. Now, if I do the same thing when I fly back and I also fast for that day and I only eat one meal, and I even have one really big meal, I then save another 500 calories. That's 1,000 calories over the week. Now, if you want to, when you're on holiday, you want to enjoy yourself and you want to have, say, for example, a beer every day, or you want to have like a dessert every day, you've already got 1,000 calories banked towards that, which you already got that in your locker in terms of saving calories for there. So that's one strategy I'd highly recommend that people do. And also in terms of jet lag can be an issue if you're going on longer haul flights. And something a lot of people don't think about is in regards to the human body only knows what time it is based upon two things. So these are going to be in terms of whether the sun is in the sky, so whether it's light, and secondly is in terms of your eating and food patterns. So if you're flying to a new time zone, that's quite a big difference. You want to eat on your new time zone as soon as you get there. You don't want to be trying to eat in like English time or American time, wherever you're from, because it's really going to throw your body out of sync. So one of the really quick ways you can acclimatize to a new time zone is eating immediately into the new time zone pattern, and that will start to get your body into sync. So that would be one thing I would look at for people when they're going on vacation. I don't know if that's something you used. Akash, obviously, I know you were in Bali for 5 weeks recently.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of fasting when traveling. But I do think it sort of depends on how long the flight is. Sometimes, if it's a 6, 7, 8 hour flight, I think it's doable. I think after that, it can potentially, I personally like taking my food on the plane. But I know that digestion can sometimes be a bit hit and miss. So I think fasting can have its place, but I think the second best option is probably take your own food, as opposed to relying on the plane food, which most of the time is, like you said, a pile of shit, and probably won't hit much of your protein targets either.
No, and it's interesting. Actually, one of the things you brought up there is in regards to protein targets. So that is the in my opinion, I like to call it the master macronutrient kind of body composition that people need to make sure they're hitting. So when you're away on vacation, it's very easy to eat carbohydrates. It's very easy to eat fats, but it's often difficult for people to sometimes hit their protein target. So something that is a really common question is, can you take supplements with you on holiday? And the answer to that is yes. So a very easy solution for everyone listening to this, and something really tactical you can do, is take your whey protein with you. And what I would recommend you do, instead of having to take the entire tub, is get like a Ziploc bag, put however many servings you want into that. You can tie that bag up, put it inside a plastic shaker, take a scoop with you, off you go. You've got enough protein for wherever you want for when you're traveling. If you had one protein shake a day, for example, or maybe one protein bar, if you had 2 scoops of protein and a protein bar, that's going to be roughly, say, 60 to 70 grams of protein, plus 3 meals a day of 50 grams of protein. You're going to be roughly around where most people probably need to be. It's about 200 grams of protein for a guy. So that will be another thing I would probably look at. That's quite an easy way to substitute diet, and also a way to stop you overeating, because protein helps a lot in terms of satiety and making you feel fuller for longer. So If you're under eating or protein suddenly and you're not used to that and you're on holiday, it's probably a recipe for you to overeat, or maybe the things you shouldn't be eating.
One of the things I really do when I'm away is fasting in the morning up till about 11, 12, and then having lunch, and then like a normal lunch, and then in the afternoon will be sort of protein powder or protein bar with maybe some fruit, just very, very light, just keep me going, and I'll have a bigger dinner. Because most people when they're abroad, they'll probably be exploring in the day. They'll probably stop somewhere for lunch and they'll probably have a nice dinner. So that way you can hit your protein target and also sort of be strategic with your calories, as opposed to hammering sort of the hotel breakfast and, you know, accumulating up like 1,000 calories before you even left the hotel.
And I'm not going to lie, I'm a big food guy and I like eating. So it's probably the reason I work out so much. So like the hotel buffet breakfast is a dangerous place to be. So one thing in buffets I would generally try and avoid, because you're setting yourself up for failure before just turning up there, because you will end up overeating. I would recommend that I do something like the one plate rule, I call it, whereas I can have one plate and as long as I can get it on there, I'm good to go. But I focus firstly on like, okay, I have to hit my protein requirements of say 30 to 40 grams. I'd have maybe a couple of eggs, an egg white omelette. That's probably half of my plate gone already. And that automatically is putting some controls into how much I can eat. And what's really important for anyone listening to think about is that if you go to breakfast in your hotel and you have Nutella pancakes at 9 a.m., do you think you're going to have something sensible for lunch? Probably not. So like, as you said, I always recommend, like, it's fine to enjoy yourself while you're away, but I would try and keep that to the evening rather than breakfast and lunchtime.
Yeah. And what about from an activity perspective? What are your sorts of guidelines when it comes to activity, training, staying fit when you're abroad?
Personally, I think it comes down to planning ahead, and it depends on the scenario, I think. So I think people should just focus on being active and doing things they enjoy. So for example, like having recently moved to Dubai, I do like a lot of things like wakeboarding, which is like super active, and you'd be surprised how tiring it is if you do that for an hour or two. Like, do fun things you actually enjoy. If you have kids, play with kids all day, be up on your feet. I would just focus on being active. And then I would recommend, if people can, you work out whilst you're away, in particular if it's something you want to do. Don't feel obliged you have to. Like, if you only go on vacation once a year and you want to take a week off, that's not an issue. But if you're the sort of person who goes on vacation every 6 weeks, that's a different conversation, because like, this is one thing I say to a lot of people is the devil's in the dose. Like, okay, you can do that like once or twice a year, take a whole week off and maybe chill out. But if you go away on holiday like every other month, then that's a different thing you need to then manage. So something I'd really recommend people do is try and work out while you're away, focus on getting your resistance training in. And I'd recommend maybe changing your training program to even just do like 1 day on, 1 day off if you're time restricted. So you could do something like an upper lower training program. So upper body, a day off, lower body, day off, repeat, or even like full body rest would be like an effective way to get the most bang from your buck, if that makes sense.
What if someone's listening to this and thinking, I haven't really got a good hotel gym. There's not really any, I don't really want to join another gym around me. What can I do in the hotel room that'll keep me going? What are some of your favorite workouts that people can try out on the spot?
On the spot, if you're limited for equipment, I would even take resistance bands with you. Could be a really easy thing to do, or even just focus on doing things like press up workouts and stuff like that would be a really good idea. But if that's the situation, you don't have access to anything, which is unusual in a hotel. I personally wouldn't bother just doing body weight. I would probably take a rest, because it would probably destroy my soul just doing press ups in my hotel room. But the chances are you're going to have a hotel gym and they're going to have some equipment. So I would literally just go in there and utilize whatever they have. If they have dumbbells, for example, up to like 15 kilos only, go in there, for example, you can train your entire body with that. And if you have limited weight, what you do is you make it harder. So you slow the movements down. So if you take the tempo down to doing, for example, a dumbbell lateral raise, if you do 5 seconds up with a 5 second hold and a 5 second negative, even if you use 5 kilos, that's going to become very difficult very, very quickly. And I think it just comes down to understanding the concept of how difficult can I make this workout with the equipment I have available to me, rather than bitching and moaning that I don't have a hack squat or whatever it is. Like, one of my favorite exercises on, for example, with legs is like a Bulgarian split squat, which is like you can like destroy yourself. If you were sadistic enough and you wanted to train at home, you could probably do it with body weight and build enormous legs just doing that if you had the right mindset. It's just having the creativity, I think, to maximize the equipment you have available to you, I think is important.
Well, 1.5 rep Bulgarian split squats, done for 20 reps at a slow tempo. It's going to leave anyone on the floor, right?
Yeah, but that's what I said. Like the basics are what work, and you can apply a basic exercise like that in your. You could do that in your hotel room. If you've got a chair, you could do a split squat with that. If you did rounds of that for 20 minutes, like you're going to know about it.
Yeah. So you covered training, covered nutrition. What about lifestyle and general sort of mindset tips when away? Because some people can have that sort of screw it mentality of, yeah, I'm going on holiday, and then they just sort of they might train, they might take their shakes, but they'll come back 5 kilos heavier, or they've lost all that hard work that they put into the first place. How do you keep the mindset to actually come back potentially the same body weight? And it's more of a maintenance phase as opposed to, let's screw it, I'm just going to do whatever.
That's a really, really good question. And the first thing I'd want anyone listening to this to sit home and think about is like, have self-respect for yourself and think about what you've done and what you've achieved and hard work you've put in as the first thing. The second thing I've taught a lot on a nutrition course recently teaching other trainers is in regards to body set point theory and basically like metabolic adaptation. So essentially, if you've lost, say, for example, 12 kilos to then go on holiday to Dubai to strut down the beach and look awesome, if you go away on holiday, your body is literally primed to gain body weight. Because if you've went from, say, 100 kilos down to 88 kilos and you lost 12 kilos of body fat, your body's looking to get back to 100 kilos because that's its body set point. What happens when you lose body fat, to go into some of the science of it, your fat cells shrink, which reduce the release of a hormone called leptin. And as leptin reduces, that means that your BMR, so your basal metabolic rate, will also slow, and it will also increase your hunger levels because your body's trying to trick you into eating more food to get your body weight back up again to where it feels comfortable. Now, what happens with this is that your body is basically primed as soon as you start putting in an excess of calories to throw weight back on very quickly. And what people don't realize is that when you cycle in terms of your weight going up and down all the time, as your fat cells get smaller and then larger again, your fat cells actually increase in size and get bigger, which means it's easier for you to actually gain more weight again. And this is why, like, I'm big into numbers, being a nerd, that statistically 77% of people within the first 12 months of losing weight regain it. And then within 3 years of people losing weight, 95% of people regain weight and more, which means actually, like diets, only 5% of diets are successful in people long term. And when you start to understand the numbers behind this and why people fall off the wagon and the science behind it, you just need to be very aware that you can have, like, respectfully your cake and eat it. You can enjoy some of the things you love. Like, I love cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory, but like, which isn't ideal when you live in Dubai and it's like within walking distance, but and they also deliver it. But it's understanding that, like, you have to, like, think about energy balance. So if I eat an extra 3,500 calories over the amount of calories I'm supposed to be eating, that could potentially gain 1 pound of body fat, which is how many calories in 1 pound of fat. And when you start to understand this, you're like, okay, I can have, for example, I can go to Cheesecake Factory. I could have the Skinnylicious steak, whatever it is, it's 500 calories. And then I could have a cheesecake, but I could have half of it and share it with my partner. That's maybe going to be 1,300 calories, than rather having like a massive main course that's 2,000 calories and an entire cheesecake to myself that's going to probably put me at 3,500, 4,000 calories. Small little changes like that in terms of choosing better things on the menu and maybe sharing a dessert instead of eating the whole thing is an important thing. And actually a great hack for anyone eating out to see how full you are. And like, if you're listening to this and it hits home, this is a quick thing I learned, is when you're eating, stop, go to the toilet. And when you stand up, you suddenly realize how full you are. And that's a really good cut-off mechanism to be like, oh, I'm actually quite full. Maybe I shouldn't eat this entire cheesecake myself. And that would be something I would think about.
That's a good one. And just a few things on that if you can go back to the fat cell theory,
yeah,
it'd be good to sort of describe that in a little bit more detail, because I think it can kind of really scientifically, but graphically as well, get your head around the fat cells. Because I think when I first learned about this about 10 years ago, I couldn't believe that you didn't actually lose fat cells.
No.
You only get bigger or smaller.
People think they disappear.
Or you get more of them, right? And once you get more of them, you can't lose them. So if you could just go into that would be fantastic, because I think that's one of the biggest reasons why you shouldn't rebound.
Yeah, and this is super important. Like, I'm not trying to scare people of this. The nutrition course I've been teaching, the first 3 hours of it is basically going through this, because this is so important, because this is how, like, this is why reverse dieting is so important. So if you're a client of mine, a client of Akash's, get in shape and make sure you do a reverse diet and you do it properly, because that's how you keep results for life. That's how now, like, I can eat 4,000 calories a day and still have abs walk around, because I built my metabolism up to that point where, like, I can eat cheesecake and it doesn't really matter anymore. And you can get there too, but you just have to follow the process. Now, when you look at how the body actually works in terms of fat cells, the fat cells actually will shrink, as Aka said. And a lot of people think you piss them out, they disappear. That's completely not true. But I can see you laughing because people think that's actually what happens, or like you sweat them out, like it doesn't happen. So fat cells will get smaller and then larger depending on what's going on. But what can actually happen if you go on holiday and you eat too many calories too quickly, your body can't get the energy, the ATP and the energy into the fat cells quick enough. So what happens is hyperplasia, whereas the fat cells actually increasing the amount of numbers you have. So you're actually gaining more fat cells that can then get fatter. You can get fatter quicker and quicker and quicker. So every time you go up and down dramatically, this is what's happening. You're increasing the number of fat cells you have, which means the longer you do this for, every time it's going to get more difficult to lose weight, which is why people say as they get older, they find it more difficult to lose weight, because often they're going down 15 kilos for summer, up 20 kilos after the summer, and it's up and down, which our body absolutely hates. Our body doesn't want to be doing that. And all the like survival mechanisms in our body aren't designed to do that. And if you think about it logically, a lot of people will try and over diet to get weight off quickly. Now, I like to think about this like starvation mode. So if I wasn't in the desert here in Dubai, I had no food or water, I wouldn't want my metabolism to slow down as much as possible and be as efficient as possible with the food I'm eating to make sure I stay alive as long as possible. But what we actually really want, we want our body to be like a Ferrari, like a high performance car that's super inefficient and just burns loads of calories, which we wouldn't want if we were living in the desert and like dying because we didn't have any food. So what happens when people try to undereat too quickly and try and do too much cardio, the metabolism slows down super fast because they're like, holy shit, what's going on here? We don't have enough energy coming in. We need to hold on to what we have, then making it harder for you to lose weight, which again is another important thing in terms of, I try and explain to people is if you try and push the body to do anything in terms of losing weight quickly or gaining weight quickly, it will push back on you very, very hard within 2 to 3 weeks, because your body is designed to do exactly the opposite of that, if that makes sense.
You said your body hates it when you do these big swings. What's going on inside that it really hates? And talk about that as you get older. People say, "Oh, I'm in my late 30s now. Can't not in the shape I used to be, or I can't everything takes longer." What's actually going on here?
So I think the late 30s thing, like I'm 32 now, I'm not as young as I used to be. And I think one of the things that has a big impact on that is that we have more stress as we get older and maybe more distractions that can then make it more difficult. But that's partly an excuse. But the other thing we have to look at, that as we get older, hormonal function and endocrine system will change, but that's heavily affected by our lifestyle and also our body fat. So if as a man, if you have higher levels of body fat, you're going to be more pro-estrogenic. So you're going to have more estrogen, which is the female sex hormone, which is not what you want. We want to be more testosterone driven in terms of having leaner body composition. You'll be stronger, also makes you more confident and more driven, which is often why you see, it's unusual you see, for example, a top CEO or executive who is overweight, because to be like very driven individual, you tend to have higher testosterone because of probably your lifestyle factors. That then means you're going to be a driven individual who's going to be successful, rather than someone who can't necessarily look after themselves very well, who's from a weaker hormonal point of view. So that's one thing I would look at. But in terms of the cycle up and down in terms of people's calories, that's mainly driven by people's psychology, and I think not understanding what's actually going on. And I actually think about, one of the things I think about at the moment, like I know Akash got super shredded recently, and I'm on the process of doing that now. I went on some body fat measurement scales. I said I was 3% the other day. They were definitely broken. I'm not 3%. My scales at home say I'm 30, which is definitely not true either. But that's a side tangent. But what's important for people to understand is how this works. So as I said, as your fat cells get smaller, your body uses the hormone leptin. It gets released from fat cells. So as the fat cells shrink, leptin is going to reduce, which is going to slow your BMR, basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories your body's basically burning. And then it's also going to increase your hunger levels. So for example, if you're trying to lose weight and like, holy shit, I'm starting to feel really hungry, guess what? That's actually a good sign, because it means your fat cells are probably shrinking, which means your body's like reducing the amount of leptin that's being released, and then that's increasing your hunger levels. So I actually see that as a sign of success. And I often find the days where I personally feel the most hungry the next day. I'm like, holy shit, I've dropped loads of weight suddenly. This is awesome. And when you start to like, it's like social patterning in your brain of like understanding like, okay, I feel hungry today, but tomorrow I'm gonna be like really happy because I've lost loads of weight. When that happens, you're then like willing to commit to it. And I think that's what's important about clients working with successful coaches like me and Akash, because you're not guessing these, like you're not guessing the program or what you're doing is right. We are telling you what works because we've done it with thousands of people. And when you have certainty about what you do, it's much easier to adhere to it, which is again, why I'm saying in terms of people making sure you don't fall off the wagon on holiday and go completely batshit crazy, which I've done. Like we've all been there. I'm sure Akash had as well. Like we've learned from these mistakes, and it's very easy to undo 12 weeks of hard work. And then you're almost in the same position you were 3 months ago and you've got to diet again.
Absolutely. So one thing I really like you mentioned there is building a high performance Ferrari, where you can effectively, like you said, you see yourself, you can eat 4,000 calories a day. You can have your cheesecake, fit it in. You don't have to worry about it. You can have your cake and eat it and stay in shape year round. What's the process of getting in shape? You do the effective reverse diet. Then how do you turn that into a high performance Ferrari? What's that journey? Of course, that's a long journey, but what are some of the key milestones along that way that enable someone to go from that initial cut to the high performance Ferrari year round?
So I think what's really important to understand about this, I think the big mistake a lot of people make, and I know you haven't made because you got super shredded recently, people don't get lean enough initially. So people like lose a bit of weight, they get to like 12, 14% body fat. Like, oh, I want to bulk now. I'm like, realistically, I would keep going.
Just for the listeners to contextualize what that means. What would when you say 12?
For like 12 to 14%,
like guys and girls.
That's probably where you're starting to look at. You've got your top abs starting to come like visible-ish. It depends on your genetics, but I say that, and I say, I don't know if you'd agree with women, probably like 18 to 20% body fat, maybe 20%. You're in good shape for women because women hold more body fat. And body fat can't really like necessarily be accurately tracked other than using a DEXA scan. So I wouldn't really hold too much justice in that. But the point I'm trying to make is that people need to focus on getting really, really lean, like at least once, and then hold that for probably 4 to 6 weeks roughly, and then start to reverse diet. Because it's the same when guys look to add muscle mass on, they bulk up and then they cut straight away. It's like you have to hold and own that weight, almost like I was saying in terms of like body set point theory. Your body needs to get used to whatever weight you're at, and it will start to acclimatize. So for example, for me, I know my body weight now sits 95, 96 kilos. Before, when I'm heavy and I'm bulking up, it sit about 100 pretty comfortably. Like your body will get used to a certain area. But if you push down really quickly and then you try and add weight really quickly, your body has no idea where it's really trying to be. So firstly, I'd say get really, really lean, do that in an appropriate way, and don't crash diet, don't starve yourself to death, because that's not going to set you up for success in the long run. When you do get really lean, what you then want to do is focus on reverse dieting and be very patient. So initially, I think you can probably be a bit more aggressive, adding calories back in, probably like 20 to 30% memory, probably pretty quickly out the gate, mainly from probably carbohydrates would be my main thing, and fats, depending on where your fats are, because it helps in terms of hormonal function. And from there, I would essentially just assess what happens week to week. So if you've taken your calories up 30% for 2 weeks, absolutely nothing's happened, you're the same body fat, you're getting stronger and performance is improving, I'd probably add like another 25 grams of carbs and then see what happens for 2 weeks. If nothing happens, your same body fat percentage, I'd probably do the same, add another 25 grams of carbohydrates, and just keep like adding food in until you start to see something start to change. Either you don't want to eat anymore, which can happen. And I've been that. I was doing like 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day at one point. Or like my body got super, super fast in terms of my metabolism. Or you start to gain a little bit of weight. Then as soon as your weight starts to move, I would then probably just sit at that calorie intake. And that's essentially it. It's almost like if you had like the pendulum in terms of like calories in versus calories out, we just slowly start stacking the calories in until we start to see some movement, maybe with the scales, and then stop, and then just sit there for 2-3 weeks, focus on performance. And like what we talk about is having like 4 phases in terms of how we work with clients. So it's like a priming phase in terms of like habits and more psychology and actually getting you into it. Phase 2 is like fat loss phase, where you need to get super lean. Phase 3 is the reverse dieting phase, which we're sort of explaining there. And then when you get your calories up to a reasonable level, then it becomes into like more of a performance phase in terms of building strength, endurance, and focusing actually enjoying your training. And by getting better at training and getting stronger, maybe adding more muscle tissue, your body actually becomes more inefficient in terms of the actual weight uses calories and needs more energy. So we can then start to repeat that process in terms of, if you have more muscle mass and you can train much harder, you can eat more, then you can put more calories in. And then guess what? Like body set point theory, your body gets used to having more calories, and then you can start to like maintain your weight at much higher calories. And then say next summer rolls around, you want to drop like 6 to 8 pounds, for example, you could drop 500 calories. You start dropping body fat really, really quickly. And that's probably on a diet where you're eating maybe 1,000, 1,500 calories more than you were for a year or two beforehand.
Earlier on, you said the stat around after 3 years, people gain 95%. Is it 95% of people regain body weight and
within
more.
3 years and more?
So, we talked about the reverse dieting and, adding things slowly. And I think that can go well for a period of time. But then how do we then make sure that 3 years later, they're still on track? Because it's easy.
That's when it comes down to sorry, to talk over to you, but I think that's when it comes down to goal setting. So I think it's important that everyone does a cutting phase every year, regardless if you actually have something to get lean for. But I would suggest,
do you recommend every year?
Yeah, like not that you have to get inside out shredded.
Okay. I was going to say that's torturous.
If you start to get like a bit soft, I would then maybe cut for 6 to 8 weeks just to knock some and I've been there before where, like I said, I was eating 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. And I was like, it sounds cool when you're in a diet and you're starving, but like do it for 2 weeks every day and it gets really monotonous after a while. And then you're like, you know what, I don't really want to eat so much. And like you start to get signs. And these are the signs I say when people start to need to look at maybe like doing like a mini cut or bring the food down and look for a phase to resensitize. You can't stand the sight of food you don't really want to eat anymore is probably one thing. 2, maybe your digestion is starting to get sluggish. So I'd always recommend people are very aware of what they'd eat. I would generally avoid dairy and gluten like the plague. And the other thing I'd recommend is in terms of like if performance is starting to suffer and you're not enjoying training, actually reducing your food and putting yourself in a deficit can often make you feel better. I actually generally feel I perform better mentally and physically in a slight deficit than when I'm in a bigger surplus, just because if I'm eating a bucket load of carbohydrates all day, a lot of the time I'm just feel slightly zoned out and I want to sleep.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I don't eat much in the day and I save most of my calories for the evening for that exact reason, because I just want to be sharp. With what you said with regards to like that tidy up each year, do you recommend that for people with long-term muscle building ambitions, or 100%. Is it more for like the lifestyle? So I'm just want to maintain sort of people.
100%. You can't like be in a calorie surplus for 24 months in a row, for example. Like at some like if you were looking to say you're listening to this right now and you're 75 kilos and you want to be 90 kilos jacked, like you're not going to be able to go 75 to 90 and be in good condition without having to do like an up and a down and up again, if that makes sense. Because in the process of you want to gain like a lot of muscle tissue, you're going to have to put yourself into a calorie surplus, which means you're going to accrue body fat over a period of time, which means this is why it's important to start quote unquote bulking. I don't really like that word, gaining muscle from a very lean position, because if you start bulking from a lean position, your body's very receptive to growth for first point. But the second point is it means you can stay in a calorie surplus for a long time, gaining muscle tissue, focusing on getting stronger before you might need to adjust and start to bring your body fat down. Because I've seen it with myself, I've seen it with thousands of clients. Say with a guy, once you go above 15, 16% body fat, your body, for like the percentage of weight you gain more body fat than muscle than when you're below that. And that's when you have to understand that, okay, you're gaining muscle tissue, but you're also gaining body fat. But guess what? You're going to have to get rid of that body fat at some point, which means you're going to have to diet for longer. And when you're dieting for longer, you're going to lose some of the muscle tissue you gain. So it's like a 2-step forward, 2-step back scenario. So you're better off cutting it a bit shorter, keeping a bit leaner, which generally helps people psychologically. And then you can then go again. So for most people, you only need to maybe do that for 6 to 8 weeks, or even if like you wanted to go in like a big gaining phase for 2 years, if you've got a holiday in 6 to 12 months, you could do it for 6 weeks. Just feel a bit better about yourself while you're away.
You talked about, just if you take it back to that 3-year bigger picture, you talked about goal setting. Walk us through that process of how you set goals, to the short-term goals, to effectively make this a lifestyle solution where you're in shape year round. You're not dieting again. You're not out of it, dieting from a place of not being in control, which is very different to dieting because you want to diet and drop body fat, if that makes sense.
So, and this is like, I don't really recommend this for people unless you've done it for a while. Like I almost intuitively eat. Like I know
Yeah, of
That's
course.
a slight lie because my food's delivered. But like, I know what 125 grams of chicken looks like. I've weighed it like 1,000 times. I can eyeball probably 100 grams of oats, like probably like my eyes closed. Because once you've done something enough times, you know, it's like called the 10,000 hour rule. Once you've put enough time into something, you have the skill. So what I think is important for people is like, if you're at day one and you've got a 3-year goal, you want to achieve or look like X, I think is set short, medium term and long-term goals. So, okay, 3 to 6 months, what do I want to achieve? Obviously depends on your start position. So if you're a bit fat, respectfully, if you're 100 kilos in 6 months, I want to get down to 85 kilos. I would say that's realistic. Set that as your first goal. You could then maybe do, if you were then in like a leanest composition, you could then maybe do a gaining phase for another 6 months. And I would just try to cycle in that sort of aspect. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend people took too much of a long-term goal, because I think that's very unrealistic. Because, and the same with business, I talk to people about this, it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. Because like, I wouldn't, after I saw you, Akash, in Nashville, I had the virus, which I'm not going to say in case this goes on YouTube and gets banned. I also then had a stomach parasite. I lost like 7 kilos in like 3 weeks because I couldn't really eat. Yeah, it was bad. The recomp afterwards has been awesome. Like when I went back to Dubai.
That's why you dieted.
Yeah, so it looks great now. But and I think that's just a point, an example that came to mind in terms of like, you're going to have things that happen in your life which are just thrown in front of you, whether it be injury or illness, that you can't necessarily overly plan. So you should have like a long-term perspective of like, this is what I want to look like, but the short and medium term goals are like these things in front of me. And what's really important is, and I think where people get overwhelmed, is they look too far down the road and they think it's too unachievable for them, rather than focusing on what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? So today I'm going to do my workout that Charlie or Akash has given me. I'm going to stick to the food I'm supposed to be eating. I'm going to make sure I sleep correctly. I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. And it comes down to just like habit stacking. It's no different in terms of business. It's just like consistency compounds for you. And you're in the situation you're in right now because of the decisions you made over the last 12 months. And you're going to be in the position in 12 months' time because of the decisions you make today, tomorrow, the next few days, and the rest of the year, if that makes sense.
Well, momentum is such a key part of this, right? And it could be, it's make or break at the beginning, especially where how someone starts their first few weeks makes or breaks the next 3 years sometimes with someone like body transformation. How do you get people off to the best possible start so they can take that forward momentum all the way through?
That is a great question. It's one of the things that I've spent a lot of time working on our coaches with. And this is where it's an important thing for people to understand, is that we are dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with robots. They're psychological and emotional creatures. Therefore, we have to understand that things aren't necessarily going to be done how they're supposed to be done. So I love numbers and statistics. Apparently, statistically, 26% of people consume more calories than they think they are. And hands up, I've done that today. I ended up snacking on something in the fridge that was dope that someone made. I was like, I'll just have some of that. But that's almost factored into my plan with my intuitive eating, which is another subject. But what I mean by that is that we will actually undershoot calories in terms of probably what you should give clients, factoring in they're going to cock up and eat 25% more anyway. So that, like, okay, say for example, a client's should have maybe 2,000 calories. We might give them 1,750, knowing they're probably going to eat an extra 200-300 calories a day anyway, and then they're going to get the achieved outcome. But why we would do that is because at the beginning, as you mentioned, what's really important is a positive reinforcement in terms of wins quickly. So that client losing weight in the first few weeks is a big deal because it gives them confidence in themselves and themselves understanding they are good enough and they can achieve that. And that's really fundamentally what's going to put them in good stead for the long run. So no one starts badly generally and then does really well. People tend to start really well and then get phenomenal results. If someone falls off the wagon in the first 3 days when they're excited, chances are they're not going to do very well in the long run, which is why it's important to make sure you get quick wins, you build confidence, and you do all these things at the beginning, even if you're a bit over aggressive at the beginning and then you have to adjust things afterwards, just to make sure you get the progress and then also confidence within the individual you're working with, which is why it comes down to, again, understanding human psychology and how we work, because like we understand this concept, but if you said, like, we're trying to give people, we're not selling people the flight, we're selling people the vacation, if that makes sense. So we're selling people the dream at the end. Like, realistically, we know as trainers and coaches, we want to do this in the most sustainable manner possible, but sometimes we have to sell them the dream, get them some quick results, and then manage the process from there, rather than being like, okay, at first we need to do this, we need to like balance out your metabolism at the beginning for 3 months. So people aren't going to wait 3 months to see results. So that's why it's important to understand how human beings work, I think.
Why do you think people would join something like what we do, and 3 days later still not do anything? It's something I'm constantly trying to like figure out, like, why people do that. And I love how you say, by the way, that, you know, we're dealing with human beings, we're not dealing with robots, because a lot of the stuff in the fitness industry is all based on like robots and physique athletes. And like, for example, like prepping you would be the easiest thing in the world, right? Because you just go off and do it. Yeah, because it's so ingrained in you. It's not the hardest thing. But when you're dealing with the general population who's juggling 10 different things in life, and fitness may be their top, maybe their fifth priority or their sixth priority, it's a whole different ballgame, right? And trying to crack that thing of like, 3 days in, it's still they're already off the wagon. It's like, why?
I'm trying to find a really polite way to put this. I feel like banging my head against a fucking wall a lot of the time.
I hope I'm glad I'm not the only one who's like,
and like I say this to people sometimes, like, you can't automate stupidity. So for example, like our business is very streamlined and very efficient in terms of getting clients set up, whatever we do. But then like a client will moan, for example, they haven't got their onboarding information, but they put their email address in wrong. And you're like, these are the frustrations you have with people. You can't control the basics. And I think again, it comes down to human psychology, but people think sometimes they can throw money at hiring you, hiring me, hiring whoever. And yes, like I'm guilty of that. I throw money at things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I like to gamble on that and see what happens. It's fun. But the reality is that if that person has emotional and like intelligence in terms of what they really want and why, they will stick to the process. For example, a guy comes to mind, I had on a consultancy call who was in tears. He's like 550 pounds and he was hesitant to join the program. And I was like, dude, if you don't fucking do this, you're going to die. Like legitimately. I was like, how many 60-year-old men do you see who are 550 pounds? It's like, you're 45. It's like, you will not last 15 years. And actually transpired, the reason he wanted to lose weight is his father's dying of cancer. And he wanted to prove to his dad that he could do it. Now, when you actually get someone to understand why they want to do something like that, guess what? He's lost 50 pounds in like 3 months. It's insane, because his why is so strong that he now understands. But when people think, oh, I just want to get abs and then I'll be happy, you won't. Like, off tangent, I just read a book called Happy Sexy Millionaire by Steve Bartlett. It's amazing. Basically, the lie that you'll be like a happy, sexy millionaire when you got loads of money, you look sexy, you got abs, and you're famous or whatever. Like, it's a complete fallacy, because it doesn't actually make you any happier. But that's what happens, is people think that if their why isn't strong enough for why they want to get in shape, it's just because they think they should, or they have to, they won't see things through. And I think that's an important point in the process, is people fundamentally understanding themselves in terms of emotional intelligence of why they want to do something, and then helping people then understand that and then see the results through, if that makes sense.
If we take it back over 10 years, what was your why for starting your own physical journey?
Lack of self-confidence. I was very introvert. I was overweight when I was younger, which I almost feels like a different person. I can't even explain. Like, I was scared to talk to people like who I didn't know. Whereas now I couldn't care less. I'll talk to anyone. Like, I take photos and videos in gyms with hundreds of people with my top off and I'm not bothered. Like, it is what it is. But like back then I couldn't think of any more timid. But you develop as a person the more you push yourself. And a lot of that comes down to confidence and stacking small wins. So for example, the first time I actually did my own podcast, which is called The Shredded Show, if anyone wants to check it out, which Akash will be coming on shortly. I'd filmed loads on YouTube. I'd filmed loads on Instagram. I was bricking myself. I was really nervous because I was just talking to myself in my office on my own. I was like, this is really weird. The first time I filmed for YouTube and someone put a camera in my face, I couldn't talk. I just didn't know what to do. Whereas like now, like I've got a videographer living with me for a week here. He could just come in here now and I'd say whatever you want. Like, you get acclimatized to things and you can learn things. And this, I was talking to a business coaching client I work with in terms of mindset. Like, everything in life, if you have the right mindset, is achievable. You just have to understand it's a game. Life is a game of skill acquisition. It comes to like skill stacking all the skills you need to then develop what you want in life. So if that's to have a great physique, you need to understand, you need to build the skills from working with a coach like me or Akash in terms of nutrition, how to train, how to look after your body, how to provide feedback to coach for check-ins, like those sort of skills. If you want to build a business, you have to understand marketing, psychology, like all these sort of things. And it just comes to sometimes even not going too deep in on some things, because I think this is a big mistake people make, is that even, for example, people want to get great shape. People go too in depth on one thing, like what creatine should I use? Like, it doesn't fucking matter what creatine you use. Like that, if I put a Q&A up now, I guarantee you on my story on Instagram, someone will ask about what creatine should I use.
Didn't you just do a podcast today about creatine?
I did. Yeah. And like, but that's the, like, and I literally, no one will listen to it and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm just like to go to the podcast.
Crazy thing is, Charlie, we did an onboarding call yesterday with our new June members. 5 people asked questions in the chat box about creatine. It's one of those ones, isn't it?
Well, like what protein powder? Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Just choose a good brand. They're all great. Like, I can recommend you one I get a kickback from. That's awesome. But like these things don't make a difference. What makes a difference is you being consistent and letting that compound over a period of time. That is it.
So how did that? So sorry, just go back to why you started
happen
this.
for me?
Yeah. Because you said you started off from a place of.
So that happened for me by. Firstly, being lacking confidence, and then knowing that I wanted to change and identifying probably who I wanted to be. And then a big factor of that was modeling. No, I'm not meaning like modeling in front of the camera, but like modeling people who I wanted to be like. So I'd see people I aspired to be like, and I was like, can you help me? I want to get in shape like you do. And that's basically what people come to me, people come to you. And that is the fastest way for you to learn any skill. Like, and this is why, like, I've developed very quickly in terms of physically and from a business perspective, because I would just go to the best person in the world at everything and be like, how can I do this? How can I do what you've done? Because that's saving me time, which is the most valuable thing we have. And an interesting thing I read today, actually, which is like quite scary in a lot of respects, is if we live to the age of 80 years old, I believe it's 700,000 hours that works out at. We would end up spending about 200,000 hours asleep, which means in your lifetime, you only have 500,000 hours to basically gamble and spend on what you want to do. So you have a very finite resource of time. So are you going to waste like 100 hours trying to work out training nutrition, or would you rather just pay someone who can just tell you what to do, and then you get the result you want, and then you can move on to the next thing you want to learn? Because ultimately that's how you move forward in life very quickly, and you get from where you are right now to where you want to be. Like 3 years ago, I used to manage an estate agents in Surrey. Now I live in Dubai Marina and run like a couple of different businesses online, fitness businesses or whatever. And that has all happened because I have asked people for help. I've put the work in and been very consistent and relentless, and let that compound. And it's exactly the same thing from the fitness perspective. I only ever got in great shape maybe at 25, 26. And then I competed, I think, the year afterwards. And that's a really uncomfortable experience at first, but I did it again the year afterwards. And it was a big learning curve. And I've put myself out there time and time again to get shot down. And the biggest piece of advice I give to anyone is that people will always try and hold you back, to be like, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Like, and often you're like, my parents were like, why on earth are you wearing pink swimming shorts and shaving your legs and doing whatever? And like, now that's basically what I do for a living, as weird as that is. And then people would be like, why are you taking topless photos on Instagram like 5 years ago or whatever? Like, those people who are trying to hold me back, like, who does Charlie think he is? You can be whoever you want to be if you have a big enough like drive to do that. And if you want to get in great shape, the only person who can control that is you, and is holding you back is you, because building a business is different. There's a lot of variables involved, but if you want to get in great shape, there is absolutely nothing to stop you doing that, except your own excuses, in my opinion, unless, for example, you got some like life-threatening injury. But other than that, like, it's all on you, which is why I think it's the beauty of it. I think why people being in shape is admired to so much, because if you see someone in great shape, like when you're super shredded, like, I know that's not easy. Like, that takes a lot of work and a lot of consistency and commitment. And you instantly have massive respect for that, because that's the one thing, no matter how much money you have, you just cannot buy.
Did you start training quite late? You said you got into shape.
No, I played rugby at quite a high level when I was like 18, 19.
Okay.
And I qualified as a PT at like 18. I thought I knew the world, and I clearly didn't. And then I sort of fell out of the love with personal training, because I didn't really enjoy training people one-to-one. I wasn't training the right type of people. And I then went into the property industry. I was training, and I was like reasonably strong from like an athletic background, but I never was like lean or had abs as such, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fair. Okay, so it's and circle back to the beginning of the podcast. It's summertime. For some people, this is potentially the time that they finally decide to pull the trigger and get in shape, mainly because they're exposed a bit more. they're in t-shirts, not feeling comfortable, they may have gone on holiday, had a trigger moment to start thinking, right, I need to do something about this. What are some of the best tips you can give someone right at the start of their journey now to set themselves up to make this the last time they ever diet?
Number one, I would say, almost like I said earlier, find someone to model. Akash, me, whoever you want. Find someone who can help you to like achieve what you want. Because the most important thing I'd actually say for this, like I have people coach me now from training nutrition, and they're the best people in the world, and their specific individual like nuances. And because I learn more, I also get better results. But the best thing about this is the emotional process is taken out of my brain, because as I said earlier, in terms of human psychology, we're emotional creatures. So I can coach myself, and I have done successfully a lot of times. But if I have someone abstract looking from the outside being like, this is the raw data, this is the information, this is what you need to do, rather than me making emotional decisions on my training and nutrition based upon how I feel on that given day, which could be thrown by business stress, relationship stress, whatever, like that's going to affect your decision-making process, which is why having a coach is important. The second thing I would say is having a support network. So for example, if you have a partner, loved one, or friends, and you're overweight, I would literally sit down and be like, look, I want to do this. This is why I want to do it. I need your support on this. This is really, really important to me, and explain to them why. Because one of the things I see over and over again is if you have a couple and Mr. suddenly starts getting in great shape, losing loads of weight, getting abs, his partner will then start trying to self-sabotage him, because she'll start feeling insecure that he's now looking better than she does. And it's like the bigger the mountain, the bigger the shadow you start to cast, if that makes sense. And it starts to make the other partner feel respectively bad. So that would be a scenario I would try and manage proactively beforehand, or even try and do something like that together. We get some of our best success by having partners working together in a relationship, because you're like a team, right? And that's how you get great results. So I would say those are the two big things. And the third thing I would say that no one actually ever wants to do is just be patient and stick to the process and think about taking it one day at a time. And that's why I said earlier, I don't really like people setting 12-month goals in terms of their body, because it becomes overwhelmed. People are like, I can't do this for 12 months. This is too much. And I also think that in mind, people need to understand you actually want to do as little as possible to get progress at the beginning, whereas most people try and do too much too quick, and that's why they give up.
I love it. Where can people find out more about some of the awesome work you're doing, Charlie?
The best things I would do suggest would be check me out on Instagram and TikTok, Charlie Johnson Fitness, very easy to find out. My own podcast, The Shredder Show, which Akash will be joining on very shortly, and also on YouTube under Charlie Johnson. So check me out over there. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to get involved.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on the show, Charlie.
Pleasure to do. Thanks so much.